Hello and welcome to CarMiZa Trunk Details Part 29. The build continues. In this video, we're going to work on the trunk lid cover. To begin, I'm going to use the OEM piece, I believe, as my starting point, and we're going to build it out from there. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, my first step was to remove the trunk lid, which I've done several times at this point. I've also removed the trunk bars, you can see, that are normally attached to the trunk. This is going to allow me to work a little bit more freely. And the first thing I'm going to do is prepare for Dynamat and put a couple layers of Dynamat on the trunk lid. So the first thing I'll do is give it a really good clean with isopropyl alcohol and a clean rag. All right, all the metal is clean. I also went through with an air compressor and kind of blew everything out just to make sure in these little nooks and crannies that I got everything out. If you're not aware, the car is going to be repainted. So what I'm going to do with the Dynamat is not go right up to the edge where my cover will be built. I'll go in a little bit, and that'll leave me an area to be able to paint up to. So the next thing I'm going to do is go through and epoxy seal some holes. There were some holes that were drilled in the trunk lid, which are exposing bare metal, obviously making it susceptible to rust. It's been over 30 years at this point, or about 30 years, so far no rust, but I don't want to take any chances. So even the factory, these are actually factory screw holes that hold that carpeted piece on. There's bare metal there. So I'm going to be using this product here, mixing it 4-to-1, just hitting it with a little brush here, just again to go around and make sure there's no bare metal. So I'll go ahead and take care of that next. Epoxy primer complete. It's just drying up now. Stuff dries really quick. It's a 4-to-1 mixture. It's epoxy, so it hardens up quick, even though it's not super hot. Finally, for once, it's about 55 degrees here in Arizona. The other thing I've done is I took some reference photos because when I Dynamat over everything, I want to know where these holes are. I might be utilizing some of these in the future with this panel that I'm building. So from here, I will go to the next step. All right, my next step was probably a little overkill, but that's the way I roll. It took me less than 10 minutes. I ran a perimeter of masking tape all the way around right where this cover is. Again, I'm going to be building this piece up. So now when I remove it, I know where to Dynamat up to. So I'll go ahead and remove it now. All right, here's the tape perimeter with the panel removed. Now at this point, I can go ahead and start Dynamatting, and again, I'll leave space along this tape edge. One thing I need to consider is weight on this panel. It's got the factory shocks, or the OEM grade of shocks that hold the trunk lid open, but I'm going to be adding more weight to it. So something to consider if you're going to be doing something similar to this. I know that you can upgrade the shocks to something stronger. I'm going to try not to go crazy with the weight, but I'm going to do 2 layers of Dynamat. So plus the iPad, and I'm going to be fiberglassing the panel and all that. So all right, time to pull out the Dynamat. All right, this is the product I'm using, Dynamat Extreme. I know there's other brands out there that are really good products, and there's a variety of different options available. Dynamat was nice enough to help me out with this build. You may have heard Earl explain that this car, the car that I'm rebuilding, was one of the first cars to ever use Dynamat. He actually was sent prototype material to test in the car back in the early 90s. So pretty cool. There is about 325 square feet in the car so far. There's more going in other places, like the fenders when I do those with the 13s and all that. So there's a ton of Dynamat in there. And I'm also going to be doing some additional sound deadening materials. So with this stuff, if you're not familiar with it, check out some of my other videos. I go through basically how to apply it, cut it, roll it, a bunch of tips and tricks there. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and get a bunch of this Dynamat on the trunk lid. Quick check-in, about halfway done. And so far it's coming out really nice. I didn't do 2 layers on every single inch of it, primarily the flattest areas. Also took care to open these holes back up for serviceability of taillights. This area needs to be open to be able to service the rod that goes over there, things like that. So maintaining those factory holes. And from here, I'll continue and get the other side done. It's taken me, I don't know, an hour and a half to do this portion. And I like to take my time. So I'm sure there's people out there that are faster. So, all right, I'll continue getting the other side complete. Dynamat complete. It took me a little over 3 hours, I think, something like that, 3 or 4 hours. Again, really taking my time. I'll give you a close-up on some of the detail here. And I know there's some people that are very critical about other people's Dynamat installations, so don't turn me up too bad. I ended up doing 2 layers, again, on some of the flatter areas like this. The other thing to consider, too, is that there's no base in the back of this car. Everything is up front. All the drivers are, you know, the 13s are in the kicks, and the mids and tweeters are going to be in the dash. So there's really not going to be a lot of resonance going on back here, but I want to be safe. I might also do some expandable spray foam inside the beams in here down the road. I'll deal with that later. But I ended up doing 4 sheets of Dynamat. I've got a big bulk kit. I don't even know if it's called a bulk kit. It's just a giant box of Dynamat sheets. Each sheet is 4 square feet. I use 4 sheets on this total. So 16 square feet, and the Dynamat is about a ½ pound per sheet. So I added about 8 pounds so far. So do you know anywhere where I can get some upgraded struts for the trunk lid? Because I think I'll need them, but that's okay. I'd rather do it right. So, all right. So with Dynamat complete, I'm going to wrap it up for tonight, and then I'll come back in a day or two. I've got, wife's got a big backsplash project for the kitchen. But after that, I will get back into working on the trunk lid, and we'll go to the next step. All right, that was not a day or two. What you're not aware of when people do these YouTube videos is that you can fake it and splice stuff together and all of that. I've been away from the car for like 30 days. It's been killing me. I did complete the backsplash. That is done. If you want to check out, I do have like a home improvement channel called Mikey Land, all one word. And I documented that whole backsplash. That thing took forever. It was a bear. Plus, we did all of our holiday decorations. We had a bunch of people in for Thanksgiving. So now it's time to go hot and heavy back on CarMiZa. So a couple of other quick things I want to show you to get you caught up. I recently had Brian Klein, and it's BRYANCLINE, from Brian Klein Interiors come over. Basically, I hired him to do like a consult, and I reviewed exactly how I plan on upholstering all these pieces. He brought over samples of the carpet, the material that I'm looking to use. He was able to find some quote unquote unbacked stuff. It's not like ozite where it's super flexible, but it's really nice carpet. It is high grade. It is actually BMW carpet, which I think is going to make it look amazing and not be horrible to install. It doesn't have as heavy duty a backing as some other carpets. Another thing that I've done, shout out to Steve Head, Esteban on Facebook. This may look like a couple of piles of junk, but to me, this is like finding a treasure off the Titanic. And very, again, you guys might know by now, I am very nostalgic and sentimental and all of that. These are the original mids that were in this car. These are, if you remember, Earl had the, the 4.5-inch BMWs that motorized out of the dash. These are the actual mids. They're in really rough shape. I kind of wiped them off and cleaned them up. I wouldn't use them. They're not really in great shape, but they're definitely a piece of kind of history as far as I'm concerned. This one even has some of the original trim ring that Henry had built. So really cool. I've got some other stuff. Again, I've got the metal rings, and I've got up here, I think I've shown you this before, I've got the original piece of zebra wood. So that stuff to me is kind of special. So, all right, so with that, let me go ahead and show you what I'm working on with the trunk lid. All right, I have been out here the last couple of nights picking away, and I wanted to get some progress, at least some design progress, before I show you what I've got going on. So the first thing is I have a new iPad Pro 12.9-inch that came in. That's going to be going in this center area. This piece right here is just a mock-up. I spent a lot of time doing this kind of design stuff, probably a lot more time than some people think may be necessary or whatever, but I'd rather do it like this. This kind of works for me. So look at this is basically just a foam mock-up. So the iPad's going to go here in the center, and then on either side, on one side I'm going to do kind of like a diagram, a system diagram, probably something even retro. I have from the original car when I got all the magazines and stuff from Earl, which I consider to be on loan. I have some amazing things that this stuff used to be, or various versions of it, different system diagrams that he used. I'll probably have something done similar to this with kind of similar fonts and graphics and look pretty retro. So that'll be on one side of the iPad, like in this section. And then this other side is going to be kind of some quick facts about the car. A lot of times people ask, oh, how long did it take? How much weight did you add? Things like that. And then I'm also going to have a QR code to get to my YouTube channel. This whole thing will be carpeted, fiberglass, the whole 9 yards. This is basically just a mock-up to get me started. So let me show you what I've done. There's two things I needed to consider from a design perspective: the layout of everything, where everything is going to go, and also considering the height of the different layers. So here's what I did for that. If you notice, we'll use this one as an example. I've got a perimeter. So again, freak. So I cut little chunks of wood just to kind of lay this out and see what it's going to look like. This will be a perimeter. This is going to be made of 1/2-inch MDF, which you guys may know I absolutely despise MDF, but I don't like it because if it gets wet, it turns into just mushy cardboard. I figure if the trunk lid gets wet, I've got bigger problems to worry about. So I will resin the entire thing, so if it does get moist or wet, it's not going to expand and contract as it does. So this is going to be a perimeter that'll go. You can see my pieces. What I'm going to do, again, is use this to mock up each of my pieces. The next step is I'll cut out all of this stuff, dry run it here, and then transfer this to the actual 1/2-inch MDF. But let me show you what I got going on here. This is pretty cool. This is a perimeter. This is going to represent washers and magnets. I've got various magnets. We'll get to those later. That's what's going to hold these things in, including the iPad. But imagine like this goes here. These are going to be the same height. Then I've got something called a fleece cleat, which is basically these little, they're a 1-inch by 2-inch in most cases, that are going to go around here. And then I've got, and then actually this goes in like this. This will be the magnets and washes, just representing the thickness, right? I've got the perimeter, and these are going to be my fleece cleats, these little 1x2 blocks. All of those are the same height. Then I'm going to have this piece right here is going to be a piece of 1/4-inch MDF that'll act as the perimeter. So it's kind of a ring, if you will. And then that's what this is going to look like. I'm calling that the fleece inlay. That'll sit on top of these cleats, but only be installed after I wrap this whole thing in fleece. You'll see that later. I've got this all figured out where this is going to basically go inside. It's going to serve as the final proper perimeter for all of these holes. And then I determined after kind of testing and playing around with things that this is the way the rest of it will go. This represents the thickness of the unit, either the iPad or these inlays that I'm doing. I can use washers to adjust the height of this. So I got that figured out. And then this is going to be the carpet. The carpet will sit flush with the piece. I tested this. I have some samples of carpet and I cut it with a nice clean straight edge. And if I butt the carpet right up against the iPad, it is a perfect clean look. But if I roll the carpet into the hole, it gets nasty and you can kind of see the white backing, you know, that it does have. It looks pretty crappy. The fleece, again, is going to basically go over like this. The fleece inlay goes inside and kind of tucks the fleece in place. That's basically an idea. I'm very confident on how I'm going to lay this whole thing out. I don't want to go too much further into the design. I want to show you more kind of, you know, movement and getting things going. So, all right. So with that, I'm going to keep working on this. I'll start getting some wood cut and get this thing laid out. All right, I lied. One other quick design thing. I'm going to use the factory carpet piece that was in here. It's kind of a molded piece of carpet as my perimeter. I'm going to put that in, fiberglass resin the whole thing, stiffen that up, And then when I build this whole thing out of wood, this represents basically the pieces that are going in there. I'll wrap the whole thing in fleece, resin it, and get all of it set up. So that again is kind of the design concept of this. Once again, it was totally overdoing it, over-engineering it, spending a whole bunch of time planning it. But again, this is my last build. So that's the way it's gonna go, and hopefully you enjoy it. So, all right, time to get the saw going and get some wood cut. Okay, it's a couple of days later. I ended up going to a really nice car show today. FCP Euro out here on the West Coast did they're doing like a semi-annual show, and they did a big show. It was awesome. So went to that today. It's Sunday. Now it's the evening. So before I start cutting, came up with a couple of other things that I'm going to be working on. First thing is I want to try to cut away. Again, think of this as just my mock-up for the 1/2-inch MDF piece that I'm going to be using. What I want to do is cut away as much of it as possible to try to save weight anywhere I can in the trunk lid. Not because I'm conscious of weight in the car, just because I don't want the trunk lid weighing 50 pounds and the gas struts don't hold it up. So this again is where, this is where the display diagram and the YouTube channel thing is going to go, and then the iPad in the middle. I need to figure out how much of this I can cut away, but to do that, I need to figure out the magnet placement for each of these pieces. I'm going to be using some high-end neodymium magnets. I bought 3 different sizes. I just temporarily attached a flathead screw and just took my metal toolbox here. Got an idea of kind of the strength of each of these. For the iPad, this, by the way, is what I'm using. It's a 12.9-inch Apple iPad Pro. It's a little bit older version. Bought it refurbished, but I got a really good deal on it. All right, so with this, there's areas of this that are magnetic, some that are not, as you can see here. So I can feel it kind of pulling around. I did also research to ensure that the magnet's not going to screw up the iPad. I understand there's several different mounts that utilize magnets. So I did find that there are 4 points, and you can see I can kind of move it around, and it wants to go to that spot. So that's where it's going to be the strongest. So now what I'll do is lay this out, measure this out, get my center, and then transfer that onto this piece, at which point I can then determine where I can kind of hog out and cut this away. So I'll go ahead and do that. All right, got everything laid out in terms of the magnet placement for the iPad. One other quick thing. I ran into kind of a design snafu. It's going to happen with stuff like this. The way that I'm going to do this is the iPad will be sitting in there, and hang on one sec, let me grab carpet. Okay, so here's what I've decided I'm going to do. The way that this whole thing's going to work is instead of building like a trim ring around the iPad, or the iPad sits, like down inside and there's a drop in and stuff like that, I just want it as clean as possible. So the iPad is actually going to be suspended off of the piece of wood by 1/4 inch. The carpet I'm using, this is not it, but it's the same type, is 1/4 inch. The carpet is just going to butt up against the iPad like this. The silver here, I'm going to deal with that later. I'll address that. But the problem I'm going to have here, this is going to give me an awesome, really nice clean edge, I think. When you roll this carpet, I could roll it, but then you start to see the inside of it. I just don't like that look. So I'll keep it flat, but there's the charger for it. There's no way I can get a cable in there and maintain that. So I'm looking into some wireless chargers. These iPads don't really do wireless charging, but allegedly there's some out there. So I'm going to buy a couple different ones and try it and see if that'll work. The other thing I considered is I've got the buttons, which I won't need to get to. I'm using a Bluetooth speaker, more on that later. And then I've got, these are my volume buttons, and then that's the on-off kind of power button, if you will. I won't need to be able to get to that. The iPad's going to be able to come out. I'm going to take it out and I'll use it in my house. I bought a case for it and stuff, so I'm not just going to leave it in the car. But my point I wanted to make is that I carefully considered where these buttons are. This I think I can hide when I do the carpet. I got an idea here to be able to kind of hide this, if you will. But even so, I put the iPad so it's going to be like this, where the buttons are at the bottom, so less likely to see it. So again, even things like that I'm considering just to try to make this as clean a build as possible. So as you can see, I've got my arrow pointing up, and therefore my buttons are going to be on the bottom. So I've got those transferred over onto this piece. Now I can figure out where I can cut this out, and then I'm going to figure out my magnets for this. For those magnets, I'll do magnets in this piece here, and then there will be steel washers that'll attach to these pieces. It's just going to be a piece of 1/4 inch, probably MDF, maybe aluminum, with the design on it, and then a piece of clear plexiglass over the top. And that'll kind of magnet in just like the iPad. So, all right, continue with this design. All right, got my design finalized. Man, I'm a nut. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna leave this kind of a cross piece here. You'll see why later. This is just for the iPad. I'll cut away these sections, and then for the two, I'm just calling them panel number 1 and 3, 2 being the iPad. This I'll cut away as well on both of these. So everything is laid out, magnet placements, cutaways, everything is good. That's gonna wrap it up for tonight. So tomorrow night, we'll actually get the saw going and start making some dust and mimic this onto a piece of 1/2 inch MDF in preparation to get this whole thing assembled. Okay, it's a couple of nights later. Last night I started working on basically I rough cut the perimeter piece, and then started routering it and realized I had some issues with it. I was a 1/16 off on one dimension, which to me isn't acceptable. So I basically scrapped that, and I'm going to start over. I'm going to do things backwards from the way I initially intended. So I'm going to work from the center out. I'm going to first build 3 mock-up pieces, one that represents the iPad, and then 2 mock-up pieces for the outside panels. These aren't going to be used in the final design. They're just basically for placement and getting everything set up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do this out of 1/4 inch MDF. I'll go ahead and table saw cut these, and then get the dimensions basically square or rectangular in this case, and get everything set up. All right, even though this is just something basic, I feel I don't show enough in my videos of me actually doing the work. And this, I think, is pretty important. This is a $99 Harbor Freight 10-inch saw. It's not the greatest saw in the world. The fence is, you can't just lock it and expect it to be square. You got to measure from both ends, and it takes a little bit more time. But the point I want to make is that you don't need, a $10,000 shop to be able to turn out good work. So. These are going to be those 2 panels. I'll double check them for square, make sure everything's good, and I'll show you the next step. I'm also going to finish cutting the iPad template as well. All right, this again will give you an idea of the level of accuracy you can get even with cheap tools if you take your time. So I was going for 10 inches. We are right there. Double check this. This should be 6.5. Look at that, spot on. And see, perfectly square. So I flip it over. There you go. So done right, even with a cheap saw. All right, time to finalize the iPad, and then I'll show you the next step for what I'm going to do to round the corners. Sometimes I need to think outside the box, especially with these tools I'm using. If you're not aware, you can put the fence on the left side of the table saw. Typically, you're going to have it on the right side. Normally, this side of the table is going to be wider, and I did that because it was the only way I could get enough meat there to be able to make that cut. So let's go see how it came out. Okay, we are good. Perfectly square, right up against the edge. And you might be asking, well, why didn't you just tape up the iPad and flush trim bit the iPad? Trust me, I thought of it, but I didn't want to risk damaging it. I just bought it. So, all right, now to deal with these corners, which I've got a little thing that I came up with. All right, this is where one of those fancy jig sets would probably come in handy, but here's my solution. I use this template to determine the radius of this curve, which is it's a 1-inch diameter, so 1/2-inch radius. Then I went on Amazon, spent $6 on these. They're a 1-inch disc meant for crafts. I'll double side tape these to this piece and then router this edge using this as my guide on a flush trim bit. Again, a lot of work to do for a piece that's not even going to go in the car, but these are going to be important because they kind of set the tone for the rest of the pieces. All right, got all my pieces on. I already did one. It cheated. I'll show you basically how this works. Flush trim bit. I do have to be careful because I can't start before or after the center of the radius, because otherwise that will start butting into the side of this. So pretty straightforward. All right, the pieces I'm calling mock-ups are all set. Well, these aren't going to be used for the final piece in the car. They will be used as a template that I will flush trim pieces of aluminum out of. That's what these will ultimately be made out of. And then a piece of clear plexiglass over the top. So everything came out really nice. The edges look great. Here's this one up against the iPad. And again, I wanted to have all the edges consistent, you know, so that when you look at it, take this off. Now this is what the three of them are going to look like. So nice and clean and consistent. And that's kind of what they'll look like. So the only other thing I'm going to do, and I'll do this later, I'm going to tape off a perimeter. The perimeter in the iPad, when you power the iPad up, it's got a black border. You can barely see it there. It's 5/16 of an inch wide. I think I may paint these black as well around there, again, just to keep it consistent across all three pieces. So, all right, these are done. The next step, going on my crazy template here, is going to be what I'm calling the fleece inlays. I kind of name everything. So the fleece inlays are basically going to be 1/4-inch MDF. And they're what I'm going to use to basically, well, you'll see. It's pretty cool, I think, the way I've got it designed. So, all right, let me get started on that, and I'll show you what I'm doing there. All right, it is the next night, and we're working on fleece inlays. So let me go ahead and get these rough cut, and I'll show you what my crazy contraption is going to look like here. All right, this will all make sense in a few minutes here. So I've got these cut for the two side panels. Then I took my mock-up piece, laid it in the center, make sure I had exactly a 1-inch border all the way around. This thing's square. I then traced it, and I'll do the same thing on the other piece. Now I'm going to take this, and I'll rough cut this with the jigsaw. And we're going to get ready to router it, and I'll show you what I'm going to do to make a jig for these corners. All right, I got the iPad fleece inlay. I'm calling it prepped as well. If you notice, this is a little bit wider than this is. That is by design with my template because I don't want to go too far down with this because it's going to make the angle steeper where this is going to be formed. You'll see that after I get the fleece on it. So I try to make this as small as possible, but yet keep everything lined up here. So this one is prepped as well. So now I'll go ahead and get this one and the other two pieces rough cut. All right, now that I got these marked out and I've got a pilot hole drilled, I'm going to rough cut these with a jigsaw. Pretty straightforward, nothing fancy here. I'll just show you this. The objective here is to get as close up to the line as possible without going over, and then we're going to router the rest of that. Okay, 3 fleece, that's tough to say, 3 fleece inlays are rough cut. So you can see, again, my edge is still there. I keep these scrap pieces too. I'm super frugal, so I'll keep these even though there's not a straight edge on them, and I can double side tape a straight edge and either router or run it through the table saw and then give myself a reference edge and therefore still utilize this for something. So I save all the scrap. So, all right, the next step is where I'm going to build a jig for the corners. And this is where, if you don't think I'm nuts at this point, you'll probably think, what in the heck is he doing for all this? It's just a little tiny corner. But this corner is critical because I'm going to be using this whole edge as my guide when I cut the carpet, when I do the upholstery. So, all right, let me show you what I'm doing here next. All right, we're going to make 4 jigs. We're starting with 3" by 3" pieces of 1/4" MDF, and now we'll go to the next step. Okay, my next step is going to be to drill a 1" hole into each of these 3" by 3" pieces. And if you notice, I've got it clamped in a drill press as opposed to just using a hand drill. This is going to be a lot more precise. I'm also using a brad point bit, which is going to give me a cleaner cut. This is a really cheap drill bit set I picked up at Harbor Freight in a bind. But again, just take my time, go nice and slow. It's 1/4" MDF. I'm not trying to go through steel here or anything crazy. All right, there we go. We're through. Notice I've got a darker backer piece so I can see the darker filings coming out. So, all right, that is cut. I'll repeat the same thing in the other 3 pieces. All right, 4 holes are drilled. Again, real nice, crisp, clean cut. That's going to be important for my router guide. You might be asking, why didn't you just drill a hole here and then you would have had the radius? I don't trust getting the drill bit in the exact place. I've done that before and it's either too shy or not far enough. This, I feel, it's going to take out slightly longer, but it's going to be a lot more precise. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm only going to do, I'll rough cut all 4 with a jigsaw. And then I'm going to double side tape a straight edge on each side, hit this with a flush trim bit, and I'll have 1 that's basically good to go, and then I'll double side tape to create 4 total. Rough cuts complete. All right, at this point I've got a straight edge double side taped on both sides, and we'll go ahead and router this straight edge. All right, fresh off the router, the true test. There we go. So now we got a corner. So now I will take this, double side tape it, and get the other 3 good to go. And then we'll get these double side taped on here and get those routered. 4 corner jigs are complete. Now we'll go to double side taping them to each of these pieces. All right, corners attached, and I'll go get just the corner areas routered. Inside corner is complete. All right, now I got a straight edge attached to be able to router off the inside area on these flat areas here, as you can see. Here we go. All right, pretty solid, not bad. Not exactly perfect. Again, if you had one of those pattern jigs, you know, from like Mobile Solutions, Brian Schmidt over there, he's got some amazing stuff. You could do this kind of thing, but this again is a one-time kind of a job. Not too shabby though. I'm good with that. Now what I'll do is take this piece, and this is not going to go in here. This is just, you'll see my kind of crazy creation with when we get into the magnets part. But now for the second one, I'll just take this double side tape, this one, buzz the perimeter, and then we're good to go. And then I will do the same 4 corner setup and the straight edge setup. Actually, that's the one there. I will do that for the iPad, and then all of my fleece inlays are good to go. Flush trim complete for the second piece. All right, all 3 fleece inlays are done. There's the mock-up pieces. Again, these pieces are going to sit a 1/4 inch higher. They're going to sit up, and you'll see that when we get to the magnet phase of the whole build. So, all right, this part is done. We're going to go on to the next part. Okay, it's a couple of nights later. It's actually Friday night. My wife is away on business for the weekend into next week, and there's no projects to be done around the house. So it's going to be some serious CarMiZa time and things getting done. So, all right, the next phase that I'm going to do is what I'm calling the fleece cleats, and I'll show you kind of what's going on with that. We'll go ahead and get those started. All right, so referencing my design, the fleece cleats are going to be like this. They're a 1/2 inch MDF. They're going to be 2 inches wide or long. This are 4 here, but basically they're going to go along this like this, and then the fleece inlay that I just built is going to go over the top, and that's what's going to hold it in place is these, what I'm calling the fleece cleats. So you'll see how this whole thing kind of comes together. So I've got a count of all the different cuts I need to make. I've already ripped some 1/2 inch MDF to be able to get that cut, and I'll go ahead and get those all prepped now. One other quick thing I want to show you here. My fancy table saw doesn't have a limiter, so I can't just put up a stop and basically just whip out a bunch of these. I need 20 of these that are 1/2 inch. So what I did is use this to determine the kerf, which if you're not aware is the width of the blade, the width of the cut that the blade makes on my table saw, which is exactly 1/8 of an inch. And then I just laid this out with 1/8 of an inch space on this piece. So now I can just zip through, get them all cut, and I'm good to go. Not too shabby for a $99 table saw if you take your time. All right, moving on to the next part. All right, the fleece cleats are done. That went super quick and easy, came out great. Everything looks good. So again, I'm using my diagram mock-up piece here just to lay everything out. My next step is to take this and transfer all of it, draw it onto here, and then we're actually going to start building the final subfloor for this panel. All right, it is the next day. I started to draw the layout onto this panel last night. I've got it kind of rough cut as well, my dimensions. I'll continue drawing the rest of this morning, and then we'll start working on the final fabrication of this piece. All right, got most of this stuff penciled out here where my magnets are gonna go for what I'm calling panels 1 and 3. In terms of the magnets for the iPad, as a reminder, if you've been following along, the back side of the iPad there's actually magnets inside of it that I'm catching, which is totally safe. I checked. It's safe to use a magnet back here. But if you notice again, just a reminder, the placement of the magnets is very particular where it wants to land. So if you can see, it kind of moves around. So I'm finding the place where it wants to stick best. That's going to be where the magnets go. But if you notice, I think all 4 are in a slightly different, these 2 might be the same, but like this one is further into the iPad than this one is. So I'll transfer that over onto this piece and get this ready for the next step. All right, everything is drawn out, complete. I even did a corner radius here because I'm gonna router this edge. To that point, I could just take a jigsaw, blast this out, do the same thing again. These 4 sections are coming out so that this cross brace remains. I want this to be, once again, as precise as possible, within reason, and actually get the card done. So I'm going to jigsaw this, rough this out, much like I did with these panels. And then I will double side tape a straight edge to each of the perimeter here. And then we'll router this, get it all cleaned up, and have that done. I'm not going to show the footage of that because it's effectively the same thing I did on that. And this video is getting pretty long. If you made it this far, thank you. You're super dedicated. We're almost done with this panel. I really want to get in this panel, or in this video, this panel basically complete and ready to go. So, all right, I'll go ahead and knock this out and I'll be right with you. One little pro tip I want to show here. For me, if I'm going to rough out cuts like this, I like to drill, this is just a 5/16 hole. I like to do the 4 corners. That way I'm not fighting this thing as, you know, the jigsaws, I'm getting it in there. So thought I'd offer that up, and I'll continue cutting these out. All right, rough cuts complete, still matching the pattern, which is good. So now I'll go ahead and router these edges clean. All right, I'll bring you along for one cut here. There's something definitely very satisfying about using a flush trim bit. So here we go. All right, looks pretty good, right? Not so fast. I had a problem. When I was routering this edge, I had plenty of double side tape, but there must have been some residual sawdust, even though I blew it off. This thing moved on me as I was routering. So this is the way I designed this. This is supposed to be a 1-inch, which it is there, but over here, it's 7/8. So again, as if you're following along, I show the good, the bad, the ugly. To me, this is not precision. It's not right. So I will fix it. This cross brace is, you'll see what I'm going to do with this later. It doesn't have to be 1 inch. I'm going to cut it down so that this is 3/4. And in doing so, get this cleaned up. So I'll go ahead and do that now. All set, much better. And I think I even prefer it now with it being 3/4. I also save more weight, right? So, couple of quick things with this too. If you've been watching up to this point, it's exhaustive, the amount of time and effort I'm putting into this. This will be my last build. So everything I've got's going into this. When I run into problems like I just had, two things occur. It kind of screws up my head because then I'm like, well, if I make other errors, whatever, I've already screwed up. So I've got to stop and fix it or redo or whatever. So for me personally, paying this level of attention, that's important. The other thing is, if you do start to make small errors, if this wasn't cut to the right size or, you know, the hole wasn't cut, you get into what I call kind of compounding errors, where one thing leads to another, and by the time you get to the end of the build, the whole thing is just a hot mess. So good with this. I'm back on track. It took me about 35 minutes. I even timed myself to see how long it would take. But again, now my head's in a clear space and I'm feeling really good about it. And now I'll continue to the next part. I got to check my to-do list, which I think is going to be drilling the holes for the magnets. All right, here's what I'm going to be doing for the next part. This kind of is a little bit of a mock-up for the magnets. I'm using 2 different size magnets, as you probably have already seen. These smaller ones I'll use for the the exterior panels. What I'm going to be doing is this is a number 632 thread per inch screw. This is the screws I'll use. They're a flathead, so they sit flush in here. I'm going to be using a T-nut, and then I'll be using a T-nut also for the iPad bolts. So basically what I do is use a gauge, measure this, find the appropriate drill bit, and then we're going to drill these in the drill press. When I do something like this too, I'll take a piece of scrap and do a test drill hole, and as you can see, I think that's going to work. I didn't have to force it in there, so again, it's precisely the right size. I'll do the same thing for the larger one. Oh, this one here. Holes all drilled, everything came out good. On to the next part. Okay, my next step is going to be to cut away as much as I can from the perimeter of this, just with a jigsaw, and then in a couple more steps, I will use a router along what I'm calling the perimeter edge. Again, I have all of this stuff, all of my steps are very carefully laid out. I'll do this kind of late at night or super early in the morning when I can't run power tools and get everything planned out, and hopefully it goes to plan. So what I've also done is double side tape again, what I'm calling my fleece inlays, which by the way, meet up perfectly, ironically, with where they should, based on the design. So next what I'm gonna do to get this perimeter drawn out is I've got a piece of 16th inch flat bar. I'm trying to do this one-handed. That's going to represent the thickness of the fleece. You'll see where that'll come into play later. Then I've got the 3/4 inch, which is representative of the perimeter. So I'll basically put this in like this, draw my line against this edge. This I know I'm going to cut a lot of it away. That was, again, if you look at my paper template, you can see I did the same thing there. So again, I'll draw this on this perimeter. I'm not going to cut away anything here because it's basically the same size as what I've got there. And I'll do the same thing on this end, and then we'll go to the next step. Speaking of things going to plan, this, I was going to cut away anything extra I had here. There's less, maybe a 16, not even, probably a 32nd. This, again, I'll router this away later. So it's just these areas I need to trim, and I'll get those cut now. Okay, the perimeter's rough cut, and I also put a 45 like I did on the top of this. You'll see why when I put it into the trunk lid. Even that I cut with a router. Okay, here's a little teaser. More on the whole carpeted piece later in the next video. But this is where it's going to go, and this is why I had to cut the 45s, otherwise it would hit here. And just kind of getting a rough idea as to its placement, and so far that looks good, but we still have more to do on this wood piece, but we're almost done. All right, next step is I started cutting what I'm calling the perimeters. I just wanted to show something here. I went back to double side taping the fleece inlays in place, and then again I'm using some 1/16 of an inch flat bar just to represent the gap for the fleece. I just wanted to show this though. That's precision. Everything lines up perfectly. Nice tight fit, but I can get this out still. But again, it's just really taking my time, even with super cheap tools. All right, continuing on. All right, it is Sunday, the next day, and I plan on spending pretty much the entire day out here. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'm gonna be putting in a long day. So I should be able to get the woodworking done today and get this video done and posted for you guys. So I did more of the perimeters here. You can see again what I'm doing. I think I showed this yesterday. I basically lopped off a corner on each side just to get it to fit in tighter into the trunk lid. That was part of the initial design. You can see I've got that on my foam template. This perimeter is going to be, again, going back to my mock-up pieces that I modeled out. It's going to be 1/2 inch MDF, and then I'm going to be using 1/8 inch masonite. This needs to be slightly higher. You'll see why when it's all assembled. So I'm going to continue doing the 1/2 inch MDF strips. Again, you can see this is intentional. We'll router this off later. I'll get the rest of these on, and then once the 1/2 inch pieces of perimeter are done, I'll move on to the 1/8 inch, get those completed as well. All right, I'm cruising along on these perimeters, but one other quick kind of an illustration of really getting precise here. This one, very nice tight fit, but I can pull it out, take the same one. This should fit the same way. I've got this one double side taped. Look at how nice that fits. So we're so tight on these tolerances, and even though this is something that's going to get covered in fiberglass, it's all about being precision. All right, the first layer of the perimeter is done, came out great. This again is 1/2 inch. Now I'm going to replicate these out of 1/8 inch masonite, and those are going to get CA glued to these. You'll see that in just a moment. So let me go ahead and get all of those 1/8 inch perimeters ripped and cut. All right, when I remove the perimeter pieces, I numbered all of them, although I demonstrated where they're kind of interchangeable, left to right side. I also numbered the 1/2 inch pieces, and then I've cut my 1/8 inch masonite pieces about a 1/16 of an inch oversize. Next, what I'm going to do, and I probably won't show this because I know this video is super long, and if you made it this far again, you're a trooper. Thank you. We're really close. We're really close to the end here for this video. I'm going to CA glue these together and then use a flush trim bit, router these edges. That way they're a perfect match. And then we're going to be able to install all the perimeters. So let me go ahead and get that set. All right, if you're new to my channel, this is the CA glue I use, the Bob Smith Industries product. Put a couple of drops of this stuff on, spray the activator on the other side, stick the two together, and it's lights out. It's not going to move. All right, this glue up process is pretty simple, but I'll show you all on the last one. I'm just putting a dot of glue every few inches. And with the MDF, I found it's kind of soaks in, so I'm spraying the activator. You got to work really quick with this stuff because you have a very short open time. Making sure that I'm overhanging on my perimeter. Give it some good pressure. Takes maybe, depending on the temperature, a minute or two, and it's cured up. I'll give it probably 10 or 15 minutes before I router, just to be safe. And again, you can see I'm just overhanging on my edge there. And next I'll flush trim these. All right, routering complete. Look at how nice an edge that gives me. And we're gonna go on to the next part. We're getting closer. All right, the next step is to prepare the mounting for the magnets. So there's gonna be magnets that hold these panels in and the iPad. And I'm using stainless steel machine screws and T-nuts that'll mount to the back side of this panel. What I like to do with T-nuts is I don't trust them in MDF, so I take a liberal amount of epoxy very carefully, making sure that I don't get the epoxy in the threads. And I'll go around the hole. This is on the back side of the panel that you've been seeing me build this whole time. And very carefully. Put that in, get it seated. Very important that it's seated nice and flush. And that's it. And I'll repeat that process. And I'm using just a quick set epoxy from, you guessed it, Harbor Freight Tools. All right, T-nuts are all set. Now it's going to be on to mounting the perimeter pieces to the panel. All right, I've gone through and just use a little bit of double-sided tape to put all of the perimeter pieces in place, very carefully checking to make sure I've got my 1/16 of an inch gap all the way around, and I do. Now I'll go ahead and brad nail these in place and get them permanently mounted. All right, just to be 100% safe, I still have my, I'll use my shims, these pieces of flat bar, just to make sure everything is good here. And we'll go ahead and start getting this nailed. The compressor is likely to kick on, but all right, that's the name of the game, and I'll just go all the way around and get the whole thing secured. Perimeters are all mounted. Now I will carefully remove the fleece inlays from each panel, each part. All right, getting closer. Next thing is going to be I'm just going to brad nail the fleece cleats into place. All right, fleece cleats are complete. Now I'm going to flush trim the border very carefully because I've got the T-nuts underneath there. So I'm going to probably build a sled, just basically a large piece of 1/4 inch MDF to put underneath it to give me a consistent bottom, and then I can flush trim this perimeter. Okay, I was able to actually router the perimeter without any problem. Came out really good. Next is going to be the spacing for the magnets. I'll show you what I'm going to do here. Congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. Holy cow, what a long video, what a lot of work. This has taken me 2 weeks and about 35 hours so far, including the Dynamat and the design and all of that. Mainly, I don't really count the hours that I spend designing or thinking or tossing and turning in bed at night. All right, so here's kind of the way this is going to work. Hopefully at this point you can understand and see what I got going on. So when I go to fleece, these are just double-sided taped in place right now. When I go to fleece this, I'm gonna, again, the next video is gonna be fiberglassing this up. This piece is just my frame, basically. So imagine there's fleece that comes up to here. After I fleece over this, the fleece inlay, these rings, will be pushed in and then stapled into place. This gives me a nice proper edge. And I'll probably tape part of this off and then fiberglass resin everything and then peel the tape off so that I have just a finished edge. I don't want to have a rough edge. That was kind of the biggest thing with this fleece inlay. Also notice I have an 1/8 of an inch lip here. That was intentional, and that's because of the masonite. That's where I got that 1/8 of an inch. And I'm going to use this. This is where the fleece will be, plus, you know, fiberglass resin and kitty hair and filler and all of that to be able to work this up. So that's kind of the way that was designed and intended and came out. Now, the next thing is these 3 pieces, again, are just kind of mock-ups. These will not be the final pieces that I use. Each of these is 1/4 of an inch thick. The iPad is exactly 1/4 of an inch thick. And these final pieces will be made of a sandwich between 1/8 inch aluminum and then a 1/8 inch piece of clear plexiglass over the top. This one, you know, one of them will display like a QR code to get to my YouTube channel and kind of some quick stats about the car, you know, time I took or whatever. And then the other side is going to have a system diagram, kind of like an old school diagram like I showed you at the beginning of the video. So right now, if you notice, these are flush. What I need to do next is epoxy the magnets in place, or excuse me, the washers. So here's what I've got going on inside. These things are so strong. So if you notice, I've got a bunch of washers. I got 3 washers right here to currently space this up. I will need to get longer screws. I miscalculated the length of the screws, so I need to get 1/4 of an inch longer. But imagine, so basically what I'll do next is, and the washers are going to allow for a lot of flexibility in terms of the height. So if I want to go add something different in here, I can. These panels, the intent of these panels is also, I can swap them out. Like if I'm going to go to a big show, maybe SEMA, for example, I could do one that's like, welcome to SEMA, you know, blah, blah, blah. So they're kind of interchangeable, hence the magnets. So now what I'll do is I'm going to get the magnets in place. Notice I got lucky there too. Everything lines up perfect. I'll put epoxy around here. I'll drop the panel back in place, and that will ensure that I'm centered. Later, what I'm going to do when I go to upholster this, so again, this is my final edge, my clean edge. Carpet will go right up to here. I'll add more washers to raise this 1/4 of an inch. So it's basically sitting like that, and I'll have the carpet come right up against this edge. Again, if you remember in the beginning of the video, I showed where if I put the carpet right up against the edge, it's a super clean, nice, crisp edge. And versus rolling it kind of looks like crap. That again is why this edge was so particular. That's why I built the jigs for the corners and try to get them as exact as I possibly could. Now I'll carpet over the whole thing, take my razor blade, run it in here, and get myself a nice crisp, clean cut. So same thing, same kind of a setup here for the iPad. Basically the same thing there. And again, we removed some weight. I'm hoping this thing's going to be okay when I go to open the trunk lid. If I have to, I will get new gas shocks, or who knows, maybe motorize it. That's a thought as well, but we'll see. I got to get this car done someday. So, all right, that is going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you've watched to the end, you are an absolute trooper. There will be more content coming for CarMiZa very soon. As soon as I finish recording this little segment, I'm going to get right back to work. I'll be out here all day. And I will make sure to get more content out quicker, and probably videos that are not quite as long. My goal is to get this part finished in this video. But there's going to be more to do. Obviously, we're going to get this whole thing fiberglassed. We're going to integrate a Bluetooth speaker as well, so that when I'm at shows, I can play the iPad and you'll be able to hear me talking, you know, in the videos. And have audio back there as well. So thank you very much for watching. If you have not already, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks again. Take care. If you stuck around, here's a sneak peek of what this will look like with the iPad. Pretty cool.